All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 o'clock, so we're going to kick this off. I'm Kathleen O'Leary. I'm the Deputy Commissioner with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you that are new to our town halls, this is something that we started about a year ago in response to the myriad of questions that we were receiving from employers across the state in relation to the pandemic. At the time, we did them a couple times a week, and now we have switched them so they're not necessarily about the pandemic or COVID, but actually any topic that we're hearing a lot of questions from employers on. So we try to be relevant and provide good information to you, and this allows us to do this in a timely manner and reach out to many of you at the same time. So thank you for joining us today. Just a little bit about how this works. There is a chat box there. I encourage you to input any questions that you have at any time while we are speaking today. If we have time to go back and answer those, we will certainly do that. We do have a couple people working in the background that try to respond to those as they come up, but we'll try to voice them as well for anyone who might be calling in who can't see the chat box. So please feel free to throw any question in there that you're looking for the answer for. The other thing you can do is in that chat box, if you're interested in future town halls, in our email list, you can go ahead and put your email and contact information in that chat box, and we'll add you to the email list that we use to send out information about future town halls. These are recorded. We do place them on our website, and Rebecca will put that link in the chat box for you to use and go back and reference, or encourage other people to go back and look at. And I think that's it as far as housekeeping details. I'm excited about the topic today. It is certainly relevant and something that we deal with every day, sometimes every hour here at DLI, especially in our unemployment insurance division, and that topic is fraud. So specifically today, we're going to be talking about employers' roles, what you need to know, how we normally work with employers in our unemployment insurance division, and also stressing now how important our roles and responsibilities are in making sure that all of you know what you can do to help us deal with what we are seeing today. So we've got some great panelists from our unemployment insurance division. So I will ask each one of them to introduce themselves, and then we have some prepared questions that we'll go through, and then take a look at that chat box. So first up, we have Paul Martin. Paul, would you please introduce yourself to the crowd today?
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Martin. I'm the administrator of the Unemployment Insurance Program.
All right, thanks, Paul. Karina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Benjamin, and I am the Bureau Chief for the Unemployment Insurance Contributions, or Tax Bureau.
Thanks, Karina. Amanda Lay, are you on with us today?
I am. Hi, I'm Amanda Lay. I'm the Bureau Chief for Claims Processing Center.
All right, and Jennifer Bertrand, who we have done all kinds of these town halls together. So Jennifer, would you introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I realize that, sorry. My name is Jennifer Bertrand. I'm actually one of the claims processing supervisors in the, I supervise some of the adjudication staff, and I am also the SIDES coordinator for employers.
All right, perfect. So this is a really great group of panelists that we've assembled today. They're the ones that do the day-to-day and the hands-on work, and probably many of you have had a chance to visit with them as you have interacted with UI. So first off, Paul, I'm gonna go to you and just ask for just a background for our viewers today. How do we at Unemployment Insurance, how do we normally engage with employers? What does that look like?
Thank you, Kathleen. Typically, we're engaging with employers on two fronts. There is the tax side of things, the contribution side, which Karina could speak more in detail of, but basically it's keeping employers paying their contributions to fund the trust fund, basically. And the state trust fund is where the benefits come from. If someone is receiving unemployment insurance benefits, it would be coming out of the trust fund. And on the benefit side of thing, if there's a separation which occurred where the worker is no longer employed, that's also where we would communicate with employers. It may be a layoff, lack of work, it may be a quit, it may be a discharge, but when we have a separation, that's a two-party issue for the Unemployment Insurance Division, and both the claimant and the employer are interested parties at that point. And we initially we'll take the information the claimant inputs into our claim module as to the reason they're no longer working, and then we immediately reach out to the employer for either confirmation or maybe a different set of facts as to what happened the last day. And then we follow a due process of communicating back and forth with both parties. Our goal is to try to arrive at, you know, what happened that last day. Are both sides in agreement? Do we have, you know, do we have new and if we have new and potentially damaging information to one party's side in the claim, we go back for rebuttal. We do, so in other words, we do follow a due process here. And that's often why there's no set, you know, we can't flip a decision on an X day after the claim is filed, because we don't know the length and involvement of the fact finding we're going to get into. Sometimes everything matches up very cleanly and we can get that decision out right away, whether eligible or disqualified. But when it comes to the two sides having disparate stories about the events of what transpired, that can take longer. We do have to go back and forth before we make the decision. And then in a two-party separation, both parties have appeal rights. They are both interested parties to the process. So if a claimant gets benefits out of the gate and the employer disagrees with it, they can request an appeal. And we have 4 steps of appeal within state government that can be pursued on an issue like that. And we have response times where, you know, if we request information, Montana has codified that there's an 8-day response time. And this is where we really would like to encourage employers to sign up for SIDES, which is electronic communication, versus the old 20th century snail mail, because I'm sure everyone on this call knows, you know, the Postal Service has been getting slower, and that really interferes with response times, and we don't like it either. But if there's any employers out there today who would like to get away from all this paper mail from UI and get on a quicker response platform, I strongly encourage you to sign up for SIDES, and we can get into that later. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jen about the second half of the question, the responsibilities employers have when it comes to UI.
Thanks, Paul. You're exactly right. We communicate with employers as soon as a claim is opened or reactivated. Well, anytime the employer is listed as a last employer, or if they fall within 6 weeks of opening the claim, that information is going to be really important in our adjudicators determining whether an individual is eligible to receive benefits. This can happen for really any reason. It doesn't necessarily have to be a layoff or a separation. They could have a reduction in hours or any situation like that. Then additionally, if you are, as the employer, fall into the base period of the claim, we also notify you, because the information that you provide to us based on that separation, even if it's not a last and doesn't determine eligibility, will still determine whether or not you're chargeable for that claim. So it is very important that employers, that all employers that receive notification from us about a claim respond, even if you're not the most recent, because if you don't, it could affect whether or not you're charged for that claim, whether or not you could be charged in the future on different claims. And ultimately, the most important thing is if we have a situation like Paul had said, these are two-party issues, if the only information that we have is from the claimant, then the employer doesn't respond, then that's all we have to go off of. So if the employer says, or if the claimant says that they were laid off and don't really provide us a reason. If you don't respond to us and tell us that that's not accurate, then you're most likely going to be charged as the employer, and the claimant's going to get benefits. So it's really, really important that you do notify us, because we have to be able to determine if the information they provided to us is accurate.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. We are getting some questions in the chat box about sides, so I'm going to skip to that. Do you want to give us just Paul kind of introduced it, but do you want to give us an introduction on what is sides and how it would benefit employers if they were to sign up for that?
Absolutely. SIDES it's the State Information Data Exchange System. It's a system that was created and it's used nationwide by 47 states right now to communicate directly with employers and third-party administrators in a consistent and timely way. One of the biggest benefits of the program altogether is that it's completely free for employers to participate in. It's incredibly fast. Normally when a claim is filed, those documents go through the mail. You have an 8-day response time. It takes a couple days for you to get it in the mail. It takes you a few days to get the information together, and then you have to either fax it or mail it back. With SIDES, you get the email notification to the email account that you set up directly the very next morning after that claim is filed. So you are notified immediately. That means that you have the entire 8 days to prepare your information, to respond. And not only that, but you can access that information anywhere, anytime. So you can log in 24/7 where you don't necessarily have to go to the post office, check your mail, and all of that. So it saves time. It allows you the full amount of time to prepare your information. And in regards to fraud, which is what a lot of this topic is going to be today, is it allows you to provide us the information that we need to stop that claim from paying out right away so that we can investigate it. If you know an individual is not filing that claim, you can immediately respond and let us know that, and it'll let us know that we need to look into that claim. So you have the ability to respond the very next day after that claim is open. So there's just a lot of benefits to signing up for SIDES. Time saving, money saving, those are the biggest.
Yeah, definitely expedites our ability to communicate back and forth, certainly.
Mhm.
Karina, you work a lot with SIDES. Do you want to walk us through just some of the information that you have today for some employers who may not already be signed up?
Sure, I would be happy to. If you're not already using SIDES right now, I could repeat, what Jen and Paula both said is that it's a great way for you to communicate back and forth with us. It's a lot faster and smoother to do. And the easiest way, all you have to do to get signed up for SIDES if you aren't already is go to our UIE services for employers. So it's uieservices.mt.gov. I don't know, did we have some slides for those? I could walk folks through real quick. If you're not using e-services already, it's pretty quick and easy to sign up. If you just, from the home page, you're just going to click the sign up here at the bottom of the page, which will take you then to our little online process for setting up a user account. It's very important. The first time you log in, you are going to have to answer some security questions in order to get access into e-services. So if you have a copy of the last quarterly report that was filed for your business, that's going to give you all the information that you need to know to get through this quick one-time registration process for e-services. So if you want to go to the next slide, the first one is just kind of identifying who you are and your responsibilities. The questions that you're going to be asked, FEIN, account number, zip code, and then some questions about that last quarterly report. And as long as you have all of that information handy, you'll be able to buzz through this part pretty quick. The next step is where you're going to sign up for SIDES. So this is the part that's the most important. And this piece is only going to pop up if your business is not already signed up for SIDES. If your business is already signed up for SIDES, this will not pop up as part of this online registration process here. But if it is, a couple of things to note when you're signing up for SIDES. signing up is as easy as providing us the contact information for who you want those emails regarding the requests to come to. One of the things we do highly recommend is that you try to use group email addresses wherever possible, simply because you never know when someone is going to be out of the office. So if you have a group email address, anyone could get that and then you know, answer it, as Jen said earlier, from anywhere, any computer, doesn't matter. You have the option here of putting in one site's contact for all of your requests that you have, and we are on currently 5 different sites exchanges. So you could have one request for each of those, or you could have, if I didn't put a screenshot, but there's an option if you have, you know, certain people that are going to answer the separations and others that are going to respond to additional fact finding or things like that. You can separate out who gets those requests. So, but it's as easy as that. And then if you want to go to the other thing I wanted to mention about the email is make sure that you do go back and include us on your whitelist. Sometimes we have heard that where folks aren't getting the emails through, and it's simply because they're being blocked. So make sure you include us on your whitelist. And then the last step in the registration process is just setting up a login ID for yourself. It is important to know that this is for you only, and don't share this around. We have a lot of employers that do that, and we're trying very hard to discourage that. It's a security measure. So this is being set up for yourself. And each person that may be responding to sides requests, so on the prior slide, if you listed 3 different people besides yourself to respond to sides requests, they will need to create a logon for themselves so that they can log on and respond to the request. So each individual should create this, but this is just setting that up for yourself. And then the first time that you log on, if you want to go to the next slide, the first time that you log on, we do have eServices has 2-factor verification incorporated into the login process. So you've probably seen this on a lot of other websites where you're going to get a little code that comes in, either text message or email, and you have that option, and you'll plug that in. And that only happens the first time, or if you change computers or delete your cookies and things like that. So that's just a little security measure on eServices. It's new, so that's why I'm mentioning it. We just put it in about 6 months ago. So the next slide. If you're already using eServices, so maybe you're using eServices to file your reports or make payments for UI tax. You're pretty familiar with how to get around in here, but just in case not, you can sign up for sides if you're already signed up for tax, but you're not signed up for sides, simply by, when you're inside of eServices, everything in eServices that's blue is a hyperlink. So in this case, when you first come in, you're at the customer level. When you click the blue account number, that'll take you to the account level. And then underneath the benefit subtab is where you're going to find everything sides related. So if you are not signed up yet, or if you are signed up and you realize you need to change, maybe Kermit's not doing the contacts anymore, you need to put somebody else in there, you can simply click edit and enter the new information or change it however you want to, or register for the first time. Additionally, when requests come in, you want to go to the next slide. This is the same. This is also where you're going to find any requests that are out there for you. So you would simply go to the size requests. It'll kind of tell you how many's out there. From here, when you click the respond button, then you are being linked over to the national site that Jennifer mentioned earlier, and it's going to bring you to their Springboard, and then from there you can click into any of the requests that you need to respond to. And then that information, once you've completed your response, is then electronically brought back into our claims system for our claims examiners to handle it from there.
All right, thanks, Karina. That was a very fast and a good summary of how you do that. I appreciate that. There are some questions in the chat box, Karina, related to, I think it's about the timeline when you sign up for sides. Can you talk about, you know, if someone has received a paper request, can they still sign up for sides, and then how does that work?
Okay. Sure. Unfortunately, no. If you've already received the paper request, you do have to continue to respond to that claim via the paper request. Sides participation is effective as of the day that you are signed up for sides. So obviously, the earlier the better. Get signed up for sides so that everything goes through. But once a claim is filed, if you were not signed up for sides at the time that a claim was filed, you're going to continue to receive paper for the life of that particular claim. But once you sign up for sides, then any claims filed after that, you will get through the sides request. So there is kind of a transition period where, yes, you are receiving both paper and sides requests, or you could be anyway. It's depending upon the date of the file that claim was filed. In addition, it's taken us some time to get up on all of the exchanges. So for a while there, we were on some of the exchanges electronically and others were paper, but at this point we are now brought all of the exchanges up. So everything should be coming through electronically, except for that quasi in between where the claim was filed.
Right, perfect. How long does someone have to respond to a sides request?
It's the same time frame as paper. The difference is you're going to get this notification earlier, so you still need to respond by the deadline, which I believe is factoring in the 8 days. However, the response will be visible out on sides for at least 30 days. For the pandemic, they've extended that to 60 days, so at any time you can go in there. And we do encourage, even late responses are better than no response at all. So even if you miss that deadline, still jump in there and respond as you can, because any of that information that we can get is helpful, especially if we're trying to prevent fraud and things like that, and you know that this individual is not filing the claim and things like that. So we do encourage late responses, but you should get it in by the due date. So.
Thanks, Karina. What about if someone has already submitted a sides response? Can they go back and change it?
Absolutely, yep. Within that time frame of the 30 to 60 days before they take it off there, at any point in time, you can go in and you go into eServices, just like I know I went through it pretty quickly, but just like I went through it earlier, you go into eServices, log in, and then over to sides, and there'll be an option to modify the response, and you can modify any response that you've already submitted.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to throw one more question your way, Karina, and then probably go to Jennifer. We've heard a little bit of talk about the increase in fraud impacting UI tax rates. Karina, do you want to just touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we've really done a lot over the last year and throughout the pandemic to keep employer tax rates as low as possible. And so in the case of a claim, if the claim is confirmed fraud, we're going to stop those payments immediately and we'll relieve any associated charges. In addition, other measures that we've taken, we have been relieving charges for separation employers when the claimant separation was COVID related. So you're not getting any of those charges impacting your account if you were the separation employer. And then back in October, there was an infusion of $200 million in coronavirus relief funds into the UI Trust Fund. And that allowed us to remain on a rate schedule 1 for 2021, which ended up meaning that the majority of employers did not see any kind of a tax increase for 2021, and many of them remained at their pre-pandemic rate that they had in 2020.
Right, yeah, and we calculate those rates every October, correct, Karina?
The rate schedule is based upon the October trust fund balance, but they're actually calculated in December.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm going to actually switch to Paul, actually. Paul, can you give us an overview of just what is happening right now regarding fraud? It's been in the news a lot. What does it mean, and how does it affect employers, and what is their role in helping us minimize the effects of fraud?
Absolutely, thank you, Kathleen. It's been an incredible year at unemployment insurance with the pandemic, and one place we got hit where we weren't expected was all the fraud we saw. And there's always been a component of fraud in unemployment insurance because we're issuing benefits. But consider that what we were seeing before is just old school. What we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, starting late. Really what we saw was starting late spring into summer of 2020 is this new school of fraud. And what happened was the trigger points were the federal government was adding an additional $600 onto each week of benefits. So some people, you could be eligible for over $1,000 a week in Montana. There was also a PUA program, and PUA that's for self-employed and gig workers. So employers on the phone on this call today, it probably doesn't apply to anything you would see, but it was for the self-employed with lower really eligibility requirements would be probably the best way to say it. We didn't have an employer like you all on the call to ping the separation off of and confirm, did this actually happen? So we had a lot of that was the incentive, I think, for the criminals. So what we started getting hit with was ID theft in large scale across the country. What happened was all these data breaches that have occurred over the past, however many years, 10 years, Equifax was half of the United States population in one data breach. All those data breaches, what happened is that information was for sale on the dark web. And so criminals and criminal organizations from really across the globe, this wasn't just US crime, they would purchase that stolen ID and file claims with the stolen ID. And by law, a state has to take the claim. We can't just say no because we don't know if that's legitimate or not at the beginning. The state by law has to determine eligibility. So it is on us to stop the fraud, but we can't just shut down the website and say we're not taking claims. We have to provide that service. So it was a ripe opportunity for criminals basically. And we started seeing it late spring, early summer, but it just a rash of fake claims. It's a stolen identity. And the sophistication of the identity that they had was terrifying to us, because they wouldn't have had this many data points on a stolen ID, but now they do. That's the amount of clean stolen ID that is available out there. And it started coming. We were the recipients of all this. We were the downstream recipients of that because we were doling out a lot of money through the course of the year. So in response, we've grown our fraud team exponentially. I think we're about 4 times the size as we were last April. They're learning a lot of new school tactics. We're increasing our technology ability as much as possible to try to prevent, what we don't want is a bunch of people poring over spreadsheets and manually having to interpret the data. So we're using a lot of new tools on the front end of our claim module and also on the back end to try to stop this fraud immediately. Because our goal is, they may make the attempt, but we don't want any trust fund dollars going out the door. Obviously, we can't stop it all, but I'm really proud of the UI team for what they've been able to accomplish. In late September, we just saw a large rash of fraudulent claims in our regular UI system. I don't know if anybody on this call was selling property or purchasing property throughout the course of the summer, but to give you an idea of the sophistication and the relentless attack, they started putting in addresses for real estate property that was on the market with the assumption that no one's going to check the mailbox for a while, so I might get away with this for a little longer. But that's the level, that's the extent they would go to. Now, in early this fall, we've placed an ID verification system onto the front end of our claim module. That helps. It doesn't stop all fraud, though. This is just going to be a continuing, we're just going to have to persevere here with eternal vigilance to try to, criminal tactics will change and we will adjust accordingly. But that's been kind of a synopsis of the year. This was not fraud we had ever seen before in a UI program. It's a new level, new school of fraud. And to all the employers on the phone or on this call, the most important thing I think you can do is, if you see whether it's a SIDES response or an initial claim filing notice in the mail, and either A, this person is working right beside you and has not experienced any layoff or reduction in work, ask them, did you file this claim? If they say no, get it into us immediately. the sooner we can tip off the fraud team that this is a fraudulent claim, we can put that hold on it and no money peels off the claim. So the immediate response is critical to us. And we also posted a phone number there in the chat, 444-0072. The fraud team will be happy to take that call as well. If you're still on paper, and that's the quickest way to let us know. But that's kind of a synopsis of the fraud we've been hit with during the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That was a really good summary of it. I think also we should note that when you're saying it's new for us, or we were seeing it for the first time, that really was nationwide. That isn't just Montana. It certainly is something that all states are dealing with and trying to curb and get ahead of really just how sophisticated they are and just how sneaky and pervasive their methods are as well. Amanda, I'm going to point to you, and Paul kind of alluded to the importance of employers responding quickly, or people using our fraud hotlines. But can you just touch on what is our process when we're notified of potential fraud? What does that look like?
Sure. Thanks, Kathleen. Paul kind of alluded to some ways that we get alerted with fraud. We do have the web address that's in our chat. That will allow you to report claimant or employer fraud. It also has PUA fraud link on it. We could get tips from claimants, employers, or even we get them from attorneys at times too. But basically we get phone calls, sides response, faxes, phone calls, emails. So we get fraud tips on occasion. And the important thing that you guys need to know is you're likely not going to get the result of our investigations. We first look to see if someone even filed a claim. And it kind of depends on where we send it. In my shop, we deal with the claims, so it could be a possible separation from work, a fraudulent claim filed. We have claims investigators that deal with hours and earnings, and we do have, like Paul said, a beefed up fraud unit, and sometimes they're sent that way as well, especially if it's, a fraudulent claim or something like identity theft. So in our unit, we look at it, and if it's a separation and it deals with you as the business, we might reach out to get additional separation details. If it's something with hours and earnings or some other availability issue, we might not reach out to you once we get the information. So a lot of employers ask, what was the outcome of the investigation? Sometimes if you're the employer that's involved, you would get notification in the way of a decision letter. Most of the time, these are dealt with in-house, and we deal with it in claims processing, claims investigation, or our fraud unit.
Thanks so much, Amanda. I would also point out, especially now when our resources are so stretched, that follow-up, we just don't have the ability to reach back to employers when they're requesting follow-up on exactly what happened. Jennifer, did you want to touch on that a little bit? You talk to a lot of employers, and what does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the fraud goes, like Amanda said, unfortunately, we can't necessarily notify employers of a result of our investigation, but do know that all tips are investigated. The other thing I'd like to say is just because there is no change in the employment with your business does not automatically mean that that is a fraudulent claim. It's really important that you respond to our request for information for this reason so that we can actually determine whether or not it is. If any individual can file a claim at any time for any reason, and if they have multiple employers, they could have a reduction in hours in a different employer. And there could be any number of circumstances that cause them to open that claim. So if nothing has changed with their employment with you, it does not mean that it's not a legitimate claim. So by you responding to us indicating that the individual is still employed with no change or anything like that, it allows us to determine, at least look at whether or not it's potentially a fraudulent claim. If you do feel that it's a fraudulent claim, if you know that that individual is working 60 hours a week for you, they've never had any loss or reduction in hours, you know the individual, then reach out and ask them, like Paul said, did you actually file this claim? If they say no, that they did not file that claim, submit that information to us as quickly as you can. Things that really help us is if you submit that information with correct and up-to-date contact information for that individual. If they still are employed by you, give us their phone number or their email address so we can actually directly reach out to them. Those things really help us to determine if it's fraud. Just writing on there that it's a fraud claim is helpful because then we can actually look at it, but is also not really the end of the fact finding for us if it ends up that it's not a fraudulent claim. If the individual is working reduced hours at another employer, we still need to know your information because we need to be able to determine eligibility and chargeability on that claim. So whether it is fraudulent or not, it's really important for you to respond to us.
Jennifer, I
Jen?
have oh, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, to piggyback on that, sometimes the employer won't recognize the employee because it's a hybridized, the criminal is just grabbing this employer. So if that's another warning sign or red flag. If you don't recognize this employee, get it into us right away, and then we can get that stop on it. And I was just going to say that graph Rebecca has up on the screen really speaks volumes to the amount of fraud we've been hit with in 2020. Now, it's also reflective of the amount of claims we've taken, but I just want to point out what we're up against over here. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, it's certainly significant. I was just going to add, and you kind of spoke to it as well. We've been hearing from employers who get requests for information for employees they don't recognize, or employees who may have worked for them like 5 years ago, and all of a sudden they're getting a request for information. Jennifer, do you want to speak to that and add a little bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. If you receive a request for information from us, it is important that you look into it. First of all, if you don't feel that that individual was ever an employee of yours, double check to make sure that it's not a different last name. Women change their name, or folks change their name when they get married or divorced or whatever. That happens. Make sure that they weren't an independent contractor for you at some point, and if they were, make a note of that so that we know a different rabbit hole for us to go down as far as that goes. If you know that they have never worked for you in any way, shape, or form, there is actually an option inside to select that never an employee, and then you're not required to answer any of the other questions. If they did work for you, but it's been 5 years, especially right now, it's really important that you still provide that information to us because of the different programs that we have. If you're the last employer that they worked for that paid unemployment, you would still be a last employer. Maybe they were self-employed for the last 5 years and could potentially be eligible in a different program, but we still need to know your information. So if they were an employee, just provide the most accurate, up-to-date information that you can about that individual, and we'll figure out what we need to do with that claim.
Yeah, I think the takeaway message for employers here is any request we are sending to you is because somebody has filed a claim and somehow you are attached with that information. So the more information you can provide back to us, we can decide what the next steps are. Jennifer, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, that is spot on.
Yeah, and I was just looking at this chat. I think some employers what they're mentioning is a notice of potential benefit charge. It's just a base period employer. And Jen, if you want to speak to, it's not that the person just quit working for you, but you are in their base period. And I'll let Jen elaborate on that.
Yeah, and I actually see one too, a comment or a question about having received the request before. So yes, when an individual files a claim, we initially determine or establish what the base period of that claim is. The employers that fall into that base period, those are the employers that usually end up paying for the benefits on that claim. We have to send notification to each one of those employers that falls in that time period to determine what the reason is for the separation and to determine whether or not that employer will be chargeable, or if we relieve those charges, and then if the individual's eligible, then it comes out of the trust fund. So if you fall into the base period but they haven't worked for you for a year, we do still want you to respond to those requests for information, because that's going to determine whether or not you're going to be charged on that claim. In the reverse situation, if you are the last employer and they only worked for you for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and you don't fall in the base period, we still want you to respond to those requests, because number one, it's going to determine eligibility for the individual, but number two, it's going to determine your chargeability on the future claim if you fall into the base period. So regardless, we want you to respond. Is in regards to the question of, I received the request 6 months ago, if it's a former employee that worked for you a year ago, you received the request 6 months ago, you're receiving it again, chances are they've reactivated the claim, or they're opening a new extension claim or something like that. If that individual, if nothing has changed with the scenario, you can simply respond by saying nothing has changed. You don't need to go into all the details and resubmit all the former documentation. You can just submit it with the dates of employment, the reason for separation, and just say, see previous response. That happens with a lot of times. If an individual reactivates a claim multiple times, you'll get tired of responding. But we want to know that that information is current and up to date. So if the employer is, or if the employee is working reduced hours, their last date of employment probably has changed every time they've opened that claim. So you'll need to submit new updated information.
On the fraud side of that as well, Jennifer, we are seeing where fraudsters are going in and reopening claims for individuals. So you responding again, I think, yeah, again, the takeaway, respond to every request we make. It's so important. The employers are really a partner with us in trying to figure out who is eligible, what we are paying, and what we need to stop. Is that correct, Jennifer? Would you have anything to?
Yep, that's exactly right. Every time you receive a notification, it is because something triggered that to go out. Usually it's because there's some new activity on that claim that we need to look at. So your response is crucial.
Perfect. Amanda, you touched on this. Jennifer, did you want to add to anything about employers hearing back once they report something as suspected fraud?
I think I commented already that, unfortunately, we cannot notify employers when we don't make an official decision per se when we're investigating a fraud tip. If we find out, about unreported separations or hours and earnings or anything like that, those are slightly different. We may have to come back to the employers and ask additional questions. We may need more information from you. But again, those aren't really going to be anything that creates a decision letter that you would actually get. So.
Right, and I think both you and Paul touched on this, but just a reminder, for employers, is it okay for them to ask employees if they have filed for UI?
Yes, if you feel that you're protecting their identity, if you feel that they are a victim of identity theft, absolutely bring it to their attention. I received this paperwork saying that you filed a claim. Is this accurate? You don't want to accuse them and, make them feel bad for filing a claim if they're working reduced hours or anything like that. But if you legitimately feel like this is a fraudulent claim, then you have the right to ask them. Also, if they indicate that they are not the ones that filed that claim, strongly encourage them to file or to contact the fraud hotline, that 444-0072 number. They can reach out to the fraud department in addition to you as the employer responding to your request for information, that really gets us to stop those claims so that we prevent payments from going out immediately. So yes, you can.
And also, you kind of touched on this, but even if an employer might suspect that it might be fraudulent, there's a whole series of factors that would play in, especially now with all of the different COVID allowances with UI, where somebody might be eligible for unemployment insurance and file a claim, and it might be very valid. Do you want to touch on that?
Yes, a lot of the circumstances that we see right now that employers are confused by them responding are situations where maybe an individual is quarantining for COVID tests or close contact or something like that. The individual may potentially be eligible for benefits for that time period, and they may be filing that just because they're not sure what's going to happen. A lot of times employers respond, well, we're paying them sick leave for that time. It's possible that the individual didn't know that. And so communicate with your staff if that's a situation. You know, if you have pay that will cover that time off instead of them filing for unemployment, communicate that to them. It's possible that they just filed the claim because they weren't sure. Other circumstances are, like I had mentioned before, individuals who are working multiple jobs. If they're working any reduction in hours or reduction in earnings, they can potentially receive a partial benefit. So even if things haven't changed with their employment with you, it could have changed with another employer. So make sure that you're responding with accurate employment dates. One of the things I can say that's confusing, especially on sides, if an employee is still working, if there's no separation, because we throw this word separation out a lot, and there isn't always necessarily a separation. If you're on sides, there's actually a drop-down menu, so you can actually select that they're still working part-time or still working full-time. You can choose one of those. And then the other question that stops people is the last day worked. If there's no separation, how do I put in the last day worked? What we want to know is the last day that they physically worked at the time that you're filling that out. If you say that they're still working full-time and you say the last day they worked was yesterday, then we kind of safely assume that, you know, they're maintaining their normal schedule. If you tell us that they're still working their normal hours full time and you say that their last day worked was a month and a half ago, then that tells us that there's further investigation that we need to do. So, you know, providing that information, making sure it's current and up to date. Again, like, just respond. I can't say it enough.
Right. So I'm going through just the questions here in the chat box to make sure that we have answered them. Some of them I'll throw out here because we may have people that are calling in and cannot see the chat box. So Karina, I don't want you feeling left out here. If we are signed up for sites but still get paper notifications and requests for more information, why is that happening?
It's probably happening due to timing of when you signed up for sides. I think I mentioned earlier that sides is a point forward. So if there was a claim that was filed maybe last year and then you signed up for sides this year, you may continue to receive paper notices for those prior claims, and then any claim that is filed after the date that you sign up, you would receive for sides. So there is kind of a transition period, if you would, where you may be getting both paper and electronic requests. If you do get paper, you're not going to be able to go into sides and respond on sides for that paper request. You would have to fill out the paper, and you can either send that in via fax or mail, or you can also even upload it into a secure web message into eServices, but you wouldn't be able to respond on sides. But so there is going to be a period of time after you sign up that you may get both paper and sides requests, but they should be on different claimants and different claims. And it's just because of the timing of when you signed up and when the claim was filed.
So somebody might get a paper notification, but if they go into sides, there will not be a record of it in there because they're being tracked separately, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure who can answer this, Amanda. I'll throw it your way because I don't want you feeling left out either. What if somebody receives notification in the mail, but it's after the deadline that they're supposed to respond? What is it that they are supposed to do in that instance?
I think Jen or Karina alluded to this. If it's after the 8-day timeline and we know that you guys get mail sometimes late because of the postal service and how busy they are. So we always ask, even if it's past or close to the 8-day time frame, that you guys are responding. If a decision has not been made on the claim yet, and we get the information from you before the decision, we will use that as part of our decision. So always, if it's close or right at the due date, please respond.
So what about if someone is using like a third-party payroll to help them do their payroll? If the PEO is signed up for Sides, should the employer sign up for Sides as well? I'm just throwing that out there. Who wants to answer that?
I can take that one. And no, they don't need to, especially if it's a PEO relationship, because the PEO is going to be handling all of the payroll, and they're the ones that actually have the employer account. So they can sign up for Sides themselves and we'll get the information. It's highly likely they will reach out to you for specifics, but the PEO would handle the responses to the Sides. So the employer themselves does not need to sign up for Sides. There is mechanisms for, sometimes we'll have third-party administrators or TPAs that are not PEOs, but they are handling, say, the tax payroll for an employer, but then maybe the employer is handling the benefit side themselves. They certainly then should sign up for Sides and can do it that way. Or likewise, if the third party is going to handle both the tax filing as well as the benefits, the third party can sign up as well. So there's really a lot of options for just about anyone to be able to respond via Sides.
Perfect, thank you. Paul, I'm gonna switch to you. We're getting to the end of the hour here. When we're talking about who pays for fraud, do you want to touch on that a little bit? We're all partners in this, but that is a question that we get. Who ends up funding some of this fraudulent activity? Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Kathleen, it's like any crime. We all pay. In UI, we feel we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the trust fund. The whole UI program does not work without employers. We're here to help people who are out of work through no fault of their own, but we are, like you said, you can't stress the word partnership enough. My years in this program, the favorite thing I do is help employers, educate employers on how to keep your SUTA and FUTA taxes lower, how to manage UI claims to where it's not costing you a bunch of money. It's a service there. It's a safety net for the worker, but there are also ways employers can help. It's really the one payroll tax an employer can control on how they navigate unemployment insurance and how they respond. Like Amanda was saying, if you're up against an 8-day timeline, and don't worry about perfection at that point. Get something into us that tells us you're engaging in the process. We can continue to go back and forth, but I think it's important to respond. Let the adjudicator, let the investigator know more will be forthcoming. I'm waiting on this and this. Here's my phone number. Call me if you have questions. But get engaged in that process. And that, I think, is the most critical piece here. But yes, we all pay for fraud in UI. And getting the other thing that concerns us is it's with this ID theft fraud, it's very hard to prosecute the criminal because they might be residing in another state, another country, but and they spoofed an IP address and they were able to file a claim in Montana. And that's what I really don't like, is we can't throw the full force and effect of the law on people trying to steal this money. Now we do have the FBI, the Secret Service. We have all levels of law enforcement in the United States of America are on this. They're keenly aware of it, and the states are working nationally in data hubs, and suspicious actor repositories, and the sharing of information. But that's ultimately what happened. We just have to adjust our tactics, because it's our duty to stop this as best we can.
Right. And for those of you who have employees that are wondering why, you know, the process has been slowed down, or sometimes their benefits are not distributed, a lot of it does relate to the fraud. We've had to just put mechanisms in place that unfortunately slow down the process for valid claimants as well. Let's see. Just some takeaways that we've talked about. Certainly signing up for SIDES is something we are encouraging all the way around for everybody, just for all of the benefits that it does provide to the employer. Most importantly at this time is just the speed that it allows us to communicate to you and for you to communicate back. Karina talked about the importance of adding multiple emails when you are signing up for SIDES, especially last year at the beginning of the pandemic. We found that we were sending out emails, but because a lot of businesses had shifted or people had shifted, they weren't reaching who would be available to even read and respond. So the importance of adding additional emails so we have additional contacts to reach out to is important. Cannot stress enough the importance of responding to any requests that we send to you. I know that it can seem cumbersome, but the information is really important for us to move forward. And in the end, it really does allow us to protect the UI Trust Fund, which is, which is what our responsibility is in the end. So we're getting close to the end of the hour. I'm just going to run through the panelists here and ask for any other closing comments you may have. Let's see, Karina, what would you add? What do you want people to walk away with today?
Oh, I think you hit it on the head there, Kathleen, with, just respond always. I know it can seem like a lot, but the information is just critical. But SIDES is the way to go. And if you are struggling getting into SIDES or have any questions, we popped up the hotline number there earlier today for our eServices customer support, and they will help get you signed up and walk you through it. But the more you can use SIDES and the quicker the information is getting back, and more complete it is, the easier that we can do our job, which is protecting that trust fund, which benefits everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Amanda, any closing thoughts from you today?
Yeah, Kathleen, you did well. The only thing I have is you guys are a big part. You see that we've saved, over $18 million. So just like Jen said, we do review each tip or, email or phone call that you guys provide. So you're a huge help in that. So thank you.
Jennifer, any closing thoughts from you today?
I personally would just really like to thank all of the employers for their active participation. I know this last year has been really hard on not just employees, but employers as well. I've talked to many employers over the last year, and just the barrage of documents that are coming at them. Patience is patience is great, and we appreciate the understanding and the participation. I cannot stress enough how important it is that you guys continue to participate and respond to us, and I can't stress enough how much simpler SIDES makes things for employers and for my staff. Just the question alone of what do I do when I receive my request after the response date? That doesn't happen when you sign up with SIDES. That is one of the biggest benefits, is you get the immediate notification. So I just thank you all, and we'll just keep plugging away.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Paul, any closing thoughts from you today?
Kathleen, I reiterate what Jen just said. One of our greatest feelings of accomplishment this year was being able to hold rate schedules at a 1, because we knew what was going to happen to employers after this much benefit goes out the door in 2020. And that timely infusion of coronavirus relief funds allowed us to keep rate schedules at a 1 for 2021. And we were, we all love a strong economy. Doesn't matter where you work or what you do. And that was critical to us because we were worried about the hit employers would take on the tax hike if we hadn't had that timely infusion. So again, thank you, employers. Another quick thing is if you happen to see a text that says something about an unemployment insurance claim, do not click that link. That's another fraud attempt. What they're doing is it's a phishing attempt. They're trying to get you to click on the link, and by doing so, it can install malware on your phone. And so if you see one of those, if you're not a UI claimant, don't click the link. If you are a UI claimant, don't click the link. There are very few instances where we would communicate with a claimant by text. They will always end in mt.gov. And what you'll notice on these links is they do not end in mt.gov. That's a criminal phishing attack. Spread the word to your employees, spread the word to your friends and family. Do not click that link. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, that's something that we're seeing recently, and we're not quite sure what the extent of the malware is. When people are clicking on the link, it may not be just contained to their ability to access UI information. So yeah, just like what Paul said, help us spread that message. Just be really careful that who you're communicating with is actually the Unemployment Insurance Division of the Department of Labor and Industry. So with that, I would like to thank my panelists today who have done such good work today and through the last year, trying to manage all of the things that are coming with us. And I would like to also reiterate our thanks to the employers. You really are an integral part of how we are able to do our operations effectively. You're a control check when it comes to fraud and part of our security measures, and we really do rely on you. So thank you so very much for engaging with us and helping us do our jobs better. I would also like to thank Rebecca in the background and Scott and Kylie, who have done such a nice job managing the chat box. We will put this on the website so people can go back and view it. And again, if you want information on future town halls, put your email there in the chat. We'll leave the meeting up for a couple minutes so you're able to do that. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep doing what you're doing, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.